If Alexander Volkanovski were to beat Islam Makhachev at UFC 284, it would be one of the best, most impressive wins in UFC history. Now, the first thing we have to clear up is what I mean by best. I rate the quality of a win entirely based off how good the fighter's opponent actually is and how big a challenge the fighter was facing. As in, if they're overcoming a big technical or physical disadvantage, it makes it a better win. Also, the method of victory matters. Outclassing someone is obviously most impressive. It shows that they're just consistently better than their opponent. An early knockout is very good too, and then like a decision win, and so on and so forth, down to complete fluke at the very bottom of the list, which almost totally invalidates a win. So in this case, best means that I believe Islam Makhachev is among the most talented fighters of all time. And Volkanovski is at a highly significant size disadvantage, so if he does it in an even slightly impressive way, then it's one of the best wins ever. Up there with Conor beating Aldo, and Izzy beating Rob Whittaker, and of course Volk beating Max the first and third times. Which leads me to my second point, that Volk would have an argument, just an argument, for a number one GOAT spot, and definitely a top five of all time. Before anyone says anything, let me explain how I decide who goes on my GOAT list. My GOAT rankings or decisions are based off of first, a combination of what we just talked about, the impressiveness of wins. So all the wins and all the losses in a fighter's career taken into context overall. I take the level of all the losses and the wins and add them up for the first criterion. Volkanovski has beaten Chad Mendes, a borderline elite fighter, post-prime Jose Aldo, still borderline elite. Then the first win over Max Holloway is one of the best singular wins in UFC history, arguably the best even. Max the second time is a disputed decision, but still impressive because of Max's level as one of the best of all time. And Max 3 is the best performance I've ever seen in a fight against an elite opponent. Add in his other title defenses, and you just have a great, highly offensively potent fighter in Brian Ortega, and then post prime Korean Zombie is just a decent win, but it was done in really impressive fashion. So, Volk ranks highly, very highly, on the first criterion. The second is all about skill. So, who is the best fighter? Best is much different than greatest. Greatness is about a fighter's legacy, whereas best is about pure talent, which Volk is one of the best fighters in UFC history, maybe the best. Him and Demetrius Johnson are like right there at 1 and 2 for me of best artists of mixing the martials of all time. So he's obviously very highly ranked there too on the second criterion. And last for me, but still of some value, is accomplishments. I rank the individual fights above the actual accomplishments. So accomplishments like becoming a double champ or having a title defense record or a consecutive wins record is more impressive for some people than others, depending on who their opponents were, because some guys are in worse divisions with less talented opponents. It's just the fact. But the record or title is still a factor in itself, but a tertiary factor in me determining my greatness rankings. So you could point to several fighters when talking about that, about GOAT status, but very few athletes have ever beaten two of the most elite fighters of all time, let alone three, which is a point that Volk could reach this Saturday, and none of them have beaten any of those guys three times. John beat DC beat Stipe, Mighty Mouse beat Cejudo and Joe B, George St. Pierre beat Hughes and BJ Penn, though at a weight advantage for the latter. I mean, you get the idea. I may be forgetting someone, but I don't think anyone in MMA history has 5 wins as good as Aldo, Islam per weight class, and Max 3 times. Of course, the longevity is a point against Volk, though his win streak is approaching record territory. But my assertion is that the high points, which are incredibly high, are more than enough to include him in the GOAT convo if he beats Islam. I already believe he's one of the top 10 greatest of all time, and arguably top 5. So for me, a win against Islam makes him a shoo-in for the top 3 GOATs and has a real argument for number 1. I feel as if many people will have a knee-jerk reaction of this statement being ridiculous, but I really don't believe it is. Stack his resume against anyone in MMA history and it will stand toe-to-toe with them. Volkanovski is on the path to greatness, and I don't think even a loss against Islam, because it is a majorly uphill battle after all, don't get me wrong, will stop him from going down in history as an all-time great fighter.